My name is Alice Whitman. I'm 29 years old and the lead architect at a renowned design firm in Chicago. 3 days before my wedding, I returned to my parents' house to retrieve my grandmother's old necklace, the only thing that still connected me to this family. But instead of seeing them, I found a thick envelope neatly placed on the living room table. My father's rigid handwriting was scrawled across the top. Wedding cancelled. Contact the attorney. It's been resolved. I stood frozen. No note. No call. No goodbye. Beneath the envelope was a folder. I opened it to find photos, ultrasound records, and a cold note. This is the reason. If you still marry him, everything will fall apart. What would you do if your parents secretly sabotaged your wedding and left you with a warning like you were about to marry a dangerous fraud? Leave a comment if your family has ever interfered with your personal happiness. Hit like if you believe love should be chosen with the heart, not with a resume. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to hear what really hid behind that warning. Because the next 48 hours changed my life forever. I grew up in a white stone estate nestled in the quiet historic district of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Every morning, my mother's silk slippers echoed down the wooden hallway, the grandfather clock chimed exactly at 7, and breakfast was prepared like a ritual. My father always sat at the head of the table, the Wall Street Journal unfolded like an invisible wall between him and the rest of us. I was the only child of the Whitman family, and also the sole heir. To outsiders, I had it all: top-tier education, prestige, a solid future. But inside that house, everything was laid out like an unsigned contract I was expected to follow. I used to love painting. At 14, I secretly submitted a portrait of my mother to a small gallery near the Charles River. When she found out, I thought she'd be proud. But she stared at the painting for a long time, then said coldly, "A Whitman doesn't live off watercolors." I went to Princeton and studied architecture instead of art because my father said, "If you insist on drawing, at least design something that can stand and hold real value." His words always carried the weight of an unappealable verdict. I obeyed, never once pushing back. Until I met Noah. I met Noah Carter during a conference on public space and the disappearance of communal architecture. I was one of the speakers. He was the guy behind the camera, filming for an independent documentary. As I stepped off stage, Noah was standing in the hallway, gazing up at the high skylight like he was reading a silent melody. When he saw me looking, he smiled and pointed upward. "Even in concrete, there's light." We started talking. Nothing poetic, just broken bits of conversation about old buildings, decaying neighborhoods, and the memories people leave behind. I felt strangely at ease. I didn't have to craft my words. I didn't have to worry about whether the person in front of me was sizing up my background or credentials. We were just two people talking like we had known each other in another life. Noah wasn't like anyone I had ever met. He lived in a rented apartment in Wicker Park, cluttered with books, cameras, and Polaroid photos taped to every wall. His dad was a welder, his mom a retired nurse. He had traveled through countless states, capturing stories no one else bothered to tell, like the man running the last gas station in Kansas, or the old woman growing vegetables in the Arizona desert, or the 10-year-old sketching comic books in his dad's garage. I thought I understood the world, but really, I had been living in a well-dressed loop designed by my parents. Noah lived in the real world. And that's what made me fall in love with him. When I brought Noah to meet my parents, they didn't hide their disappointment. My father pressed his lips together through the entire dinner. My mother smiled politely but asked questions like a cross-examiner in court. "Noah, your job is freelance? Is the income stable? You were arrested in Georgia at 19, right? During a protest. Have you thought about switching to something more stable? Like filming commercials, maybe?" Noah answered calmly, never defensive, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. After he left, my mother didn't wait long to say, "You really want to tie your life to someone like that, Alice? Marriage isn't just about feelings." I stayed silent. But something inside me shifted. I had lived my whole life meeting their expectations. Maybe that's why they thought I'd always follow the rules. What they didn't realize was, this love wasn't a whim. It was the first thing I had ever chosen for myself. We got engaged during a trip to Oregon. Noah placed a simple silver ring in my palm while we stood on an old wooden bridge in a pine forest. He didn't ask, "Will you marry me?" He just said, "If you want to, we can start from here." I said yes in the sound of wind through the trees. I felt like I was steering my own life. But I was wrong to think my parents would accept it just because I was an adult. When I shared the news, my mother paused for a long while and said, "You're really going to destroy everything we've built?" As for my father, he said nothing. He just looked at me like I had announced I was leaving civilization behind. A few weeks later, they offered to fund the entire wedding. I was surprised and cautiously hopeful. Maybe they were trying to meet me halfway? But no. They weren't accepting. They were taking control. From the guest list to the flowers, the invitations to the opening song, every detail had to be cleared by the family committee, chaired by my mother. I tried to stay calm, thinking if I just got through the wedding, they'd come around. But with each passing day, I felt something slipping away. My voice. My independence. Until that afternoon. When I walked into the old family house, once filled with piano music and endless dinner debates, and saw the thick envelope with the message etched like a verdict. They had cancelled everything. No warning. No call. No meeting. And I opened what they called the reason. I sank to the floor, my grandmother's necklace still in my hand. But I no longer felt any warmth of family in it. What was left was a question I couldn't shake. Had they never believed I was strong enough to love, to choose, and to live my own life? I met Noah on an early fall morning when the cold of Chicago made you shiver stepping out the door, but the sunshine softened it just enough to make you stay outside. That day, I had been invited to speak at a symposium on urban architecture and spatial equity. I wasn't particularly excited. These events always felt more performative than purposeful. But since my presentation was tied to a housing project in the South Side, I had to go. Noah was operating the camera for a small documentary crew filming the event. He wasn't in the spotlight, not on the organizing team, and no one even introduced him to me that day. But I remember his eyes, focused, curious, and unjudging. When I finished my talk and walked out into the hallway, I met those eyes again, near a photo wall of historic buildings. "Your talk was interesting," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I think you left out the most important part." I was taken aback. Not because he disagreed, but because of how he said it. Not sharp. Not smug. Just honest observation. "And what would that be?" I asked. He smiled, meeting my eyes. "The emotion of the people inside those spaces. The design's impressive, but if the people living there still feel forgotten, even the most beautiful architecture is just an empty shell." I didn't answer right away. Partly because he was right. Mostly because I wasn't used to someone daring to say that to me, especially not at a polished event like that. We kept talking. First about my project. Then about the rundown neighborhoods he'd filmed in Detroit. The cramped apartments in New Orleans. Even the prefab homes in Albuquerque where kids didn't have clean water. I asked him, "Why do you choose to document those things?" He replied so softly it sounded like he was speaking to himself, "Because no one else does." Our next meeting wasn't planned. I was taking a walk around the neighborhood near my office when I saw Noah setting up his camera beneath an old bridge that was about to be torn down. He was interviewing an elderly man who lived in the nearby neighborhood, someone who had watched that bridge grow old since he was a child. When the man walked away, Noah spotted me and waved. "Alice, got a minute? I know a cafe nearby with incredible pastries." I didn't know why I nodded. But I ended up sitting in that cafe for over 3 hours, listening to Noah talk about his travels, the times he got kicked off empty lots for filming without a permit, and the nights he slept in the back of his truck just to catch the perfect sunrise over the Mojave Desert. Noah didn't sugarcoat anything. He even told me about getting arrested in Atlanta during a protest when he was a freshman in college. "I'm not proud of having a record," he said, "but I don't regret it." That day, a 9-year-old boy was standing in front of the police station holding a handmade sign. I stood with him. That's all. There was something about Noah's simplicity that made me feel like I didn't have to hide anything. And what scared me was realizing how used I'd become to measuring every word, every move. But with Noah, I didn't feel the need to do that. When I shared about my past, how I once wanted to study fine arts but gave it up for architecture because of family pressure, Noah simply asked, "Do you still draw?" I shook my head. He nodded, not judging, not pushing, just quietly accepting, like he was saying, "I get it, and I'm not here to question you." A week later, I found a small package left at my doorstep. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook and a small watercolor set. No note, just one handwritten line on the first page: "For if one day you want to begin again." I sat holding that notebook for a long time, feeling like someone had just redrawn the first lines of my life. After that, we started taking more walks together, having dinner at small, unfamiliar places I'd never noticed before, and talking about things no one ever brought up at the cocktail parties my parents loved to host. Noah never asked me if I wanted to be in a relationship with him. There was no grand cinematic moment. Just little by little, I realized I always looked for him at the end of a long day. And whenever I felt lost between the pressures of work or the weight of family expectations, his voice, his calm gaze, always steadied me. Some of my friends said, "He's not a good match for you, Alice. His past is messy. His family's not on your level." But I had never once seen Noah try to prove himself. He just lived with honesty, loved with sincerity, and worked in a way he believed mattered. And when I thought about who I'd want as a husband, not the man who made the most money or the one who pleased my parents the most, but the one I could sit beside for hours and never feel alone, that person could only be Noah. I chose him. And no family tree, no resume was going to change that. The news that I was engaged to Noah was received by my parents with a strange calm that instantly made me suspicious. No more cold glares or cutting questions. Instead, they invited us to dinner with gentle smiles and offered something that sounded like a blessing. "We'll cover the entire wedding." I paused for a few seconds before replying. Not out of emotion, but because I wasn't sure I'd heard them right. "Really?" I asked, glancing at Noah, who sat next to me, his back slightly tense. "Really?" my mother said, setting her hand on a glass of mint tea, her voice as soft as if she were sharing something sacred. "You're our only child. Even though I still have concerns about this choice, I don't want your wedding day to feel incomplete." I heard all the layers beneath her words. Under that polite tone was a quiet condition. If you insist on marrying someone we don't approve of, at least don't let it tarnish the family's image. My father wasn't as subtle. "The wedding will take place at Faircrest Castle in Vermont. We reserved it last year for another occasion. Might as well use it now. People will be impressed." I knew Faircrest. It's where families like ours, or the Thomases or the Goldsteins, held their children's weddings. A French-style chateau nestled in a maple forest, where photographers didn't even need to try to get a picture worthy of a bridal magazine cover. I was about to mention that Noah and I wanted something small, more intimate. But my mother cut in first. "I'll reach out to the event planners. As for the menu, I think we'll keep it classic. Foie gras starter, smoked salmon, wagyu beef. Don't worry, I'll handle it all." And just like that, everything started falling into place. No shouting, no force, just a current pulling everything forward. But little by little, I began to feel like I was losing control of my own wedding. The guest list I originally submitted had around 80 names. Close friends, colleagues, a few relatives. But when I got back the updated version, it had grown to 260. I didn't recognize half the names. Some I'd never heard before. Others I only vaguely remembered from one of my dad's charity events. Holding the list, I walked into my mother's study and spoke calmly. "Mom, I think this number is a bit much." She looked up from her laptop, expression unbothered. "These are important connections. They'd feel offended if excluded." "But it's my wedding," I said quietly. "A wedding isn't just about the bride and groom, Alice. It's a chance for the family to present itself." I said nothing, tightening my grip on the list. Then came the photographer. I had wanted to hire a young team in Chicago who specialized in natural light and candid portraits. But my parents had suggested someone who shot covers for high-end magazines, whose fee equaled a public school teacher's yearly salary. "I already signed with the other team," I reminded my father during a meeting in his office. He set his wine glass down and replied in his signature tone, like handing down a verdict. "Cancel them. We're not sparing a few thousand for anything less than the quality you deserve." The quality I deserve? Or the image our family wants to project? He looked straight at me, saying nothing. I started to notice Noah growing quieter every time we discussed the wedding. One evening, as I was finalizing the invitation design on my laptop, he sat beside me and said softly, "Alice, do you still feel like this is our wedding?" I didn't know what to say. There were things I had assumed I'd need to compromise on. But day by day it felt like everything was being taken from me, bit by bit. Noah didn't blame me. He just said, "If this is what you need to do to keep peace with your family, I'll stand by you. But if you're changing who you are to survive this, then I'll wait for you at the end." That sentence haunted me all night. Even the menu became a battlefield. I tried to add vegetarian lasagna, Noah's favorite dish, as a main course. My mother nearly choked. Are you serious? Lasagna at a wedding? What will the Petersons think? I don't care what they think, I said. I just want one thing on that menu that makes my fiancé feel like he belongs. In the end, I was only allowed to include it as a side station. That was enough to make Noah smile, even though I knew he understood. This wasn't really about pasta. What hurt me the most wasn't my parents' interference. It was the way they did it, as if it were some kind of favor. No one said it out loud, but every action carried the same quiet message. We're doing what's best for you. Even if you're not grateful, that's fine. And I, with all the conflicting feelings inside me, still didn't stop. I kept going like I was racing against expectations, hoping some part of them would change, would see the love I had chosen with my heart, not a resume. I didn't know how much real happiness I'd be able to hold on to at that wedding. But back then I still believed that if I was patient long enough they would understand. I was wrong. That evening I had prepared everything carefully. I wore a soft turquoise dress, modest in design but still elegant. My mother had been clear, this is a getting-to-know-you dinner, not a parent-teacher conference. In other words, be friendly, but never lose the upper hand. We had dinner at my parents' home, the old estate in Cambridge that had hosted countless receptions for dignitaries, judges, and respected professors. I still remembered how every painting on the wall was chosen for feng shui and the purpose of creating academic impression. I arrived early to meet Noah's family at the gate. His mother, Linda, wore a dark brown floral dress and slightly worn low-heeled shoes. His father, David, had on a simple wool coat, carrying a jar of homemade strawberry jam. I saw them standing nervously outside the tall iron gate and stone path entrance, the golden lights casting a glow that felt warm and alien at the same time. I walked up and hugged Noah's mom. Thank you both so much for coming. I'm really glad you're here, I said sincerely. She smiled, eyes glistening. Last time I had dinner with a federal judge was when I was waitressing at an Italian restaurant downtown. Back then, I didn't even dare look them in the eye. I gently held her hand. Tonight is family. No titles. Dinner started with an appetizer prepared by my mom's private chef. The atmosphere was relatively quiet at first. Noah tried to keep the conversation going, asking my dad about his time on the appellate court, asking my mom about her recent article on estate law. They answered, polite but cold. Every question felt like a test Noah had to pass. David tried chatting with my dad about baseball but got nothing more than a lukewarm nod. Linda listened carefully, delicately lifting her glass, cutting her food, dabbing her lips, like she was afraid of making a single mistake. Then my mother suddenly changed the subject. Linda, I heard you worked housekeeping in hotels for several years down in South Boston, right? I looked up from my plate of fish. Linda nodded slowly. Yes. I worked at the Elm Street Hotel. That job helped me raise 3 kids. My mother leaned forward, eyes sharp behind perfectly applied mascara. I admire a hard-working woman. But I wonder, working in that kind of environment, do you think it shaped how you raised your son? I felt the blood drain from my body. Noah turned to look at me, then at his mother. Linda didn't answer right away. She set her fork down on the plate, hands trembling slightly. I raised my son with what I had. Not philosophy books or classical music, but kindness, gratitude. No one said anything. No one reached for more food. Then my mother smiled lightly as if nothing had happened. Oh, I didn't mean to offend. I'm just concerned for Alice's future. I placed my fork down. No, Mom. You're trying to belittle Noah's mother. And you know it. My mom turned to me. You're misunderstanding. I was simply trying to point out that family background has a major impact on married life. Not everyone is born with a perfect resume to be reviewed by you, I replied, my voice rising. My dad cut in. Enough. This is dinner, not a courtroom debate. Noah calmly set down his napkin. Thank you for the meal. We'll be leaving now. Linda quietly stood up. As I helped her into the car, I noticed her eyes were wet. Noah has never made me feel ashamed, she whispered as I shut the door. But tonight, I feel ashamed of myself. I didn't know what to say except I'm sorry. But that didn't feel like enough. When I returned, the whole house was silent. You crossed a line, my mother said without looking at me. No, I replied. You did. You humiliated the woman who raised the man I love. My father folded his arms, leaned back in the chair, eyes steady. You can marry whoever you want, Alice. But don't expect our support after that. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just stood there frozen. Part of me had known the night wouldn't go smoothly. But I hadn't expected my own family to be this cruel. They didn't have to scream or push me out. Just a few icy words and a condescending stare. That was enough to crush a person. Back at Noah's apartment that night, I sat for hours not saying a word. Noah brought me a glass of water and sat beside me. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. No, I said, my voice low. They're the problem. I thought they'd soften up, that they'd see who you really are. But they don't want to see. They just want to keep me locked in the cage they built. Noah was quiet for a while. If you want to postpone the wedding. No, I cut him off. We're getting married. But I won't let them control any more of this. I'm done. He held my hand, saying nothing. And in that silence, I understood that from this moment on, I would have to choose my own path, even if there was no longer room for the people who raised me. I went back to my parents' house on Wednesday morning, 3 days before the wedding. I didn't think too much, just wanted to pick up my grandmother's vintage hair clip, the only thing I planned to wear in my hair as I walked down the aisle. The house was eerily quiet when I opened the door. No classical music from the speakers. No scent of coffee or the jasmine perfume my mother always wore. The whole place felt frozen in a cold, stiff silence. I walked into the living room and saw a cream-colored envelope placed precisely at the center of the walnut table, as if it had been intentionally positioned so I couldn't miss it. On the front, in sharp, deliberate handwriting I recognized as my father's, were the words, "Wedding cancelled. Contact the attorney. We've settled everything." I stood frozen. My heart didn't race. It just felt like it stopped completely, replaced by a hollow emptiness spreading through my body. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of every contract termination. Event planner, catering service, band, decor team, photographer. Each entry was clearly listed, signed by my father, on my behalf as family representative, with a cold, steel-like note attached. Bride deemed incapable of sound judgment. I sank into the chair. No anger. No screaming. Just the feeling of falling into a bottomless void. And that wasn't even the worst part. Right beneath the wedding cancellation file, I noticed a thick black binder with no label. When I opened it, the first page showed a photo of Noah stepping out of a newsroom in Los Angeles with a blonde woman beside him. They weren't holding hands, but the way they looked at each other was enough for someone to make assumptions. The next page was a printed court record from when Noah was 19, an arrest during a protest he once told me about. Then came financial statements, a few student loans and a 5-year-old unpaid debt notice. And then, the video. A still frame caught Noah mid-argument with a woman around his age in a recording studio. His voice was raised, his finger pointing at her. His face was red, and for a split second I saw a version of Noah I'd never known. At the very bottom in the last pocket was a prenatal report. The date marked 3 years ago. Patient's name, Emily Carter. Gestation, 6 weeks. Scrawled in handwriting I immediately recognized as my mother's, a note read, "You still think he's the honest one?" I couldn't breathe. I'd heard Noah mention Emily before. An ex-girlfriend, something that had ended long ago. I never pressed for details because he'd always been open with me and I trusted him. But now, everything was being thrown in my face all at once, like a cold blade slicing through a trust still learning to walk. I closed the binder slowly, stood up and walked out of that silent house without taking a single thing with me. When the door clicked shut behind me, it no longer felt like my home. Driving back, I couldn't even tell if I was watching the road. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. Just a numb shock spreading through me, like I'd watched a movie where I was the main character, but had no idea the script had already been rewritten behind my back. I didn't go straight home. I parked by the river, the spot where Noah and I used to sit for hours watching the water and talking about things that felt unimportant but somehow meant everything. I opened my phone, called him, then hung up before the ringtone could even start. I needed time to think. I needed to face myself before I could face him. By evening, I went back to the apartment. Noah was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, cooking something. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, But that smile slowly faded when he looked into my eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "You look like you walked through a storm." I didn't say anything. I simply set the binder down on the table, opened it, and silently pointed to the printed still from the video. Then I looked at him. He looked through the binder. His eyes scanned each page. When he reached the prenatal report, he sighed and sat down. "I figured they'd try something," he said. "But I didn't expect this." "Emily?" asked my voice low. He nodded. "She was pregnant once. But she lost the baby after an accident. We haven't been together for a long time. I didn't keep it from you to deceive you. I just didn't want to reopen an old wound." "And the video?" I asked, staring straight at him. He closed his eyes for a few seconds. "That day she showed up demanding I go back to her. I said no. She threatened to destroy everything if I didn't. We argued. Someone filmed it. It was edited. I didn't say a word. I just watched him. I'm not a perfect man, Alice. But everything I've told you is true. I love you. And I didn't keep this from you because I think you're weak. I was afraid of losing you if you saw me through someone else's lens." I sat down slowly, gripping the side of the chair like if I let go I might melt into the floor. "I'm not mad at your past," I said. "I'm mad that all of it came to me through my parents' hands. Like they think I'm not smart enough to judge people on my own." Noah didn't try to comfort me. He didn't make promises. He just sat there letting me breathe, letting me accept the storm of confusion inside me. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the sofa in silence, listening to the ticking clock. Outside the window, the street light glowed through the thin curtains, flickering like the thoughts I couldn't organize. The next morning I got up early, brewed a cup of coffee, and watched Noah sleep, his breathing steady, face lined with quiet exhaustion. I realized my choice wasn't about whether I trusted his past. It was about whether I believed in our present, and whether I was ready to protect that no matter what. I never imagined I'd have to face a woman who once carried a child with the man I was about to marry. But that morning, when I decided to open the video file on the USB tucked inside the binder, I braced myself to see more. Not because I wanted to dig up the past, but because I needed to understand the truth of where we stood. Noah sat beside me, not flinching. When the video started playing, I saw him, younger, his hair longer, eyes burning with anger. He stood in a modest recording studio facing a blonde woman, her eyes blazing, shouting something I couldn't quite make out. She stepped closer, slammed her hand on the desk, and Noah shouted, "I told you it was over. Don't push me to that edge again." I paused the video. "That's Emily?" I asked, eyes still on the screen. "Yeah," Noah said quietly. "That was the day she came to my studio in LA. She knew I was engaged. I thought everything between us had ended years ago. But it hadn't." I waited for him to go on. "Emily and I met when I was 24. It started great. She was smart, charming, even did amateur videography. But after a few months, I realized there was no trust. She got jealous easily, quick to anger, wanted to control everything. I tried to make it work, but things only got worse. Then came the pregnancy." I looked at him, trying to keep my expression calm. "I took responsibility," Noah continued. "I offered support. We even moved in together, trying to piece things back. But then she had a car accident. Lost the baby. And after that she changed." Noah paused, like the memory still hurt. "Emily started blaming me. Said the accident happened because she was stressed over our breakup. Even though I wasn't at fault, I carried guilt for years. Every time I tried to move on, she showed up, left a trace, a message, sometimes a threat. But when I met you, it was different. You didn't control. You didn't doubt. You didn't trap me. And for the first time I could breathe." I squeezed his hand. "Then why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" He looked at me, eyes painfully honest. "Because I thought if you saw that part of my past, you'd see me as a mess. Not good enough for you. And because Emily twisted everything to make me look like the villain. I thought I could shield you from that. But I don't need to be shielded like that, Noah," I said slowly. "I need the truth. I'm strong enough to hear it. What hurt me most wasn't your past, it was learning about it through my parents. Not from you." He bowed his head. "I know, and I was wrong. I won't defend myself. I just hope you'll give me the chance to make it right." I took a breath. "And the prenatal report? It's real, isn't it?" "It is. But it has nothing to do with where we are now. I don't know how she got it into your parents' hands, But it's clear Emily wants to hurt both of us. She believes I owe her a family we never became. And you're the symbol of everything she thinks was taken from her." I nodded slowly. Inside me was a storm of sympathy, pain, and a fragile trust waiting to prove itself. We sat in silence for a long time after that. No more words were needed. Some things can only be healed with time and patience. But in Noah's eyes, I no longer saw someone hiding the truth. I saw the exhaustion of a man who had been haunted by the past and was now trying to hold on to the one good thing in his life. That afternoon I called Lauren, my best friend and an investigative journalist. I gave her a quick rundown of what had happened and asked if she could help verify the video. "Send me the original file. If it's been edited, I'll find it." 3 hours later, Lauren called back. "Alice, that video's been tampered with. The beginning and middle were trimmed, nearly a full minute missing, and the audio was altered to blur Emily's voice, so it wouldn't be clear she started the argument." I thanked her, feeling a small weight lift from my chest. I turned to Noah. "I won't let Emily or anyone else rewrite your story with lies. But from now on, I need you to promise me there won't be any more secrets. No matter what it is." He took my hand firmly. "I promise. Everything. Nothing held back." We looked at each other. The cracks between us might not have fully healed, but I knew I was still in the right place. Not because love is perfect, but because we chose to stay together, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Thursday morning, just as I poured my coffee and sat down to review the shortened guest list, the doorbell rang. Noah was still in the bedroom, so I answered without thinking much of it. A man in a slate gray suit holding a leather briefcase handed me a thick envelope sealed with red wax. Printed clearly on the front, "Summons, Massachusetts Civil Court, regarding the Alice Whitman Trust." Before I could ask a single question, he gave a polite nod. "Have a good day, ma'am," then turned and walked away. I shut the door behind me, hands trembling slightly as I opened the envelope. The document was nearly 50 pages thick, numbered neatly and meticulously, just like everything else in my father's world. The first page was a petition from the law office of Whitman Keene, with the petitioners listed as Richard Whitman and Eleanor Whitman, co-trustees of the trust fund established by my paternal grandparents in 1996. My eyes stopped at the third line. "All access to and usage of the Alice Whitman Trust assets are to be temporarily suspended until the legitimacy of the forthcoming marriage can be verified, due to potential financial and ethical risk presented by the fiancé, Mr. Noah Carter." Below that was a list of restricted assets. All investment accounts under my name. 2 real estate properties, including the West Cambridge condo passed down from my grandparents. Funds allocated for wedding-related expenses. Credit cards authorized through the trust system. I flipped quickly to the signature page. The primary signatory, Richard Whitman, title clearly marked, retired federal judge, co-trustee. I no longer felt shocked. There were no tears left. Just a strange emptiness, as if I were reading a legal document about a stranger. Not myself. Noah walked out of the bedroom as I still held the file. He looked into my eyes and I handed it to him silently. He read slowly, page by page. His face tightened, eyebrows furrowed, but he didn't speak until he reached the last page. "So they're trying to freeze your entire life," he said softly. "Through the legal system." I nodded. My voice caught in my throat but didn't break. "They don't just want to stop the wedding. They want to prove I'm incapable of making my own decisions. They want me to surrender." Noah set the file on the table and stepped closer, placing both hands gently on my shoulders. "Alice, I know this isn't fair. But I don't want you to sacrifice everything because of me." I looked him in the eyes, unwavering. "Noah, this isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about me and who I am. If I back down now, I won't recognize myself anymore." We stood in silence for a moment. Then I took out my phone and called the one person I trusted to help me find some justice in this mess. "Marcus, it's Alice. I need to see you now. I just got served, and my father's the one who filed it." Marcus Goldstein was a family law attorney I'd met years ago during a community redevelopment project. He was one of the few who had the guts to say no, even to powerful clients, when something felt wrong. We met that afternoon in his small office, the one with a faded photo of his 3-year-old daughter taped to the wall behind his desk. I laid the papers out in front of him. He read through them carefully, never interrupting, then leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. The way they've framed it is clever, but this is clearly an act of control, not protection, Marcus said. I need to see the original trust agreement. If there's no clause requiring approval of marriage, they have no legal grounds to restrict your assets. But my dad is a co-trustee, I said. And he has a lot of influence. Public influence doesn't override legal limitations, Marcus cut in, voice firm. Even a retired judge must follow the original terms. And if there's any abuse of authority in managing the trust, we can file to remove him. I looked at him, feeling the first flicker of hope all day. The real question is, Marcus continued, do you still want to go through with the wedding under these conditions? Because they're not going to stop here. I didn't hesitate. I'm getting married. Not to challenge them, but because I believe in what we're building. I can't live in the prison they built for me. Marcus nodded. Then I'll start drafting the response. But Alice, from this point on, they'll watch your every move. Are you ready for a real battle? I gripped my handbag strap and stood up. If they think pulling money and cutting off assets will make me fall to my knees, then they never really knew me at all. By the time I stepped out of Marcus's office, the sky had already turned dusky. The late afternoon sun scattered gold across the pavement, and the light blurred through the windshield like a thin veil of fog passing over my thoughts. Maybe I had lost a portion of my wealth, a piece of the status my parents had used all their lives to define success. But I hadn't lost myself. And I knew, this fight wouldn't be one of rebellion. I'd walk into it grounded in something they had never taught me to value, the power to choose even if that choice didn't match their version of right. That evening, after leaving Marcus's office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by the red brick editorial building near Longfellow Bridge where Lauren worked. She greeted me with concerned eyes behind her signature round glasses. You okay? I sank into the worn leather chair in the small conference room. My parents are trying to burn everything to the ground, Lauren. And they're not stopping at money. I told her about the summons, the frozen assets. My voice faltered when I mentioned Noah. I have a feeling they're quietly reopening everything about him. Marcus thinks so too. Lauren nodded slowly. I'm afraid you're right. This morning I got an anonymous call from an old colleague in LA. He said someone had reached out to a former officer who handled the protest Noah was arrested at over 10 years ago. They're trying to reopen the case, pull old files, look for weak spots. I froze. Why would they do that? Do they think if Noah gets branded a troublemaker again, I'll just walk away? They don't think it. They believe it. They believe you'll choose the name Whitman over the name Carter. I looked at my friend, throat tight. Lauren, I need your help. Not just emotionally. I need you to investigate this from our side. I need the truth. If Emily doctored that video, if there's any proof that my parents illegally accessed old records, I want to bring it to light. Lauren didn't answer right away. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the ceiling of the conference room. If you do this, you won't be able to turn back, she said quietly. This won't just be a family argument anymore. This will be public war. Press. Legal battles. Public opinion. Your family will see you as a traitor. I'm not betraying anyone, I said. They betrayed me first. Lauren nodded slightly. Then let me get started. The next 36 hours passed in a whirlwind. Lauren reconnected with the original source of the video, traced the IP address of the first anonymous email sent to my parents, and even pulled data from Whitman Keene's law firm bank accounts to verify suspicious payments linked to private investigation services. At the same time, Marcus filed a petition with the court requesting a review of the co-trustee management rights, citing abuse of power for personal motives. As for me, I wrote a nearly 8-page statement, honest, clear, and full of emotion. In it, I didn't just describe my parents' interference in my relationship, but laid out the emotional harm, controlling pressure, and the way they had manipulated everything around me since I was old enough to think for myself. Are you sure you want to release this? Lauren asked, her hand hovering over the send button on the email to the editorial board of The Citizen, a major investigative magazine in Boston. Yes, I said. If I don't speak up, they'll rewrite the story for me. And this time I won't let them. That Monday, Lauren organized a closed press briefing. She invited 2 investigative journalists, a privacy rights attorney, and an independent television reporter. I showed up on time with no assistant, no media rep, just a folder containing every piece of evidence Lauren had gathered. I started the briefing with a single sentence. I'm not here to defend my fiancé from his past. I'm here to protect our present from the hands trying to distort the truth. I presented the evidence of the doctored video, testimony from the original cameraman, the email history from Emily to my mother with subject lines like, "I can help you, if you're willing to cooperate." I showed the unusual payments from the Whitman Keene firm to a private investigation office in Los Angeles, made just days after Noah and I announced our engagement. Not a single reporter left early. Not a single question implied doubt. Just a heavy silence when I ended with, "If a woman's love for her parents must come at the cost of lies, then perhaps that love needs new boundaries." The press briefing ended in quiet, but I knew its echo was just beginning to spread. And when it reached the ears of those used to pulling strings behind the curtain, it wouldn't be pleasant. But it was the truth. And for the first time in my life, I chose truth over reputation. When I returned to the apartment, Noah was waiting for me, holding 2 mugs of ginger tea, his eyes gentle but filled with concern. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. I just wish they had loved me enough not to hurt the person I love." He took my hand. "Then we keep going. No matter how rough the road gets." I nodded. Because I knew, this resistance wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about the right to live by my own choices. And I wasn't going to stop just because someone else feared losing control. I was sitting in the kitchen, the last light of day shining through the glass window, casting warm golden patches across the cold marble countertop. Noah had just finished brewing 2 cups of herbal tea when my phone rang. An unknown number from Virginia. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "It's me, Alice," a deep, steady voice said. "Your grandfather." I froze. Grandpa, General William Carrington, the man I hadn't spoken to directly in nearly 8 years. In my childhood memories, he was always the stoic figure beside my grandmother during family ceremonies. After she passed, he retreated to a mountain ranch and gradually cut off contact with the entire family. I had always assumed he'd taken my parents' side because he never once spoke up. How have you been?" I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest felt tight. "Better since I've been following the news about you lately," he said after a pause. "I saw the press conference. I know what your parents are doing." I swallowed hard. "So why are you calling?" "To apologize," he said slowly. "And to let you know, there are people in this family who don't accept how they've tried to control you. I was once one of them." I didn't speak. On the other end, he sighed, then began to talk, slowly, as if each word had been sitting with him for years. "I once loved a woman named Marie. She was a literature teacher in Charleston. Strong, independent, not from a fancy background. My parents didn't approve. They told me if I wanted a military appointment, I had to marry someone else. I made the same choice your father is trying to force on you now. And I lived half my life in regret." I gripped the phone tightly. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I was a coward, Alice," he said plainly. "I used to think silence was protection. But watching you step forward in front of the public, facing your own family just to defend the truth and the man you love, I realized, you did something I never had the courage to do." A long silence. "I can't undo what your parents have done," he continued. "But I can disarm the last weapon they're holding over you." "What do you mean?" "This afternoon I signed a legal affidavit confirming that control over the family trust, originally passed down from your great-grandparents in my name, does not belong to your parents. They were never authorized to freeze those accounts." I was stunned. "And more than that," he went on, "I've worked with my personal attorney. All remaining assets under my name, the ranch, defense stock holdings, and the Maryland Investment Fund, are being transferred directly to you, along with full decision-making rights that cannot be overridden." I stood up from my chair, eyes burning. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I stayed silent for too long. And because you are the only one in this generation brave enough to live authentically, without bowing to them." I heard the sound of papers turning gently on the other end. "My attorney, Mr. Jenkins, will contact Marcus tomorrow morning. They'll jointly file a motion to lift the asset freeze. A confirmation of ownership transfer has already been emailed to you." I sank into the chair, my hands trembling slightly. "Grandpa, I whispered. If you knew I wasn't what they wanted me to be, why did you stay silent all those years? Because I was afraid of losing them, he replied. Then after a long pause he added, the same way I once feared losing my rank, my reputation, my family. But then I realized, keeping everything while losing yourself leaves you with nothing. Noah stepped into the room, his eyes full of concern. I motioned for him to wait, then turned back toward the window. Thank you, I said hoarsely. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep living the way you've been, bravely. Take back what's yours. Not just the assets, but the right to choose. The call ended. I sat still for a long moment, then opened my email. There it was, an attachment labeled, Transfer Confirmation, Carrington Holdings. Beneath it, the official record of assets valued at nearly $4 million now listed under my name. Noah took my hand. What's going on? I turned to him, eyes brimming, not with fear, not with despair, but with something deeper. My grandfather just gave back everything that was stolen from me. What are you going to do with it? I looked straight into his eyes. I'm going to use it to end all of this. And start again, but this time not alone. I knew the moment I stepped in front of the media, I had struck the match. But now, with that unexpected call from the one man I never thought would speak, I had something my parents feared most: legitimate support, and more importantly, a quiet awakening from the very bloodline that raised me. Our wedding took place on a Saturday evening at the end of June, on a small field just outside Asheville, North Carolina. There was no grand stage, no extravagant backdrop, just rows of wooden chairs in the tall yellow grass, a simple oak arch wrapped in wildflowers, and the lingering scent of rain on fresh leaves. That morning's rain had cooled the air more than we expected. A few early guests looked nervously at the sky, but I simply smiled, fastening the last button on my white linen dress, the one I chose myself. Not because it fit the Carrington family aesthetic, like my mother once said, but because it felt like me. There were only 60 guests. No one was forced to come. No one came to save face. They were people who truly loved Noah and me. Former colleagues, neighbors, close friends, and Noah's small but tight-knit family. People I never knew I'd grow so deeply connected to. Lauren, my best friend, was my only bridesmaid. She wore a soft gray-blue dress, her hair tied back, eyes filled with pride and warmth as she adjusted the bracelet on my wrist. You ready? She whispered. I nodded. Then my grandfather arrived. He wore his formal military uniform, faded with time, a chest full of medals pinned neatly over his heart, a cherrywood cane in his right hand. When he stepped into the small room where I was waiting, the entire space fell silent. You made it, I said, lips trembling. He nodded and slowly walked over, extending his hand. Let me walk you down the aisle. Not as a family representative, but because I'm honored to stand beside you. I couldn't stop the tears. I reached for his hand, a large, calloused hand that had once held war maps and battle plans. Now it held the hand of a granddaughter who dared to defy the legacy. Music began to play gently, a soft acoustic guitar, performed by one of Noah's friends. As Grandpa and I stepped between the rows of wooden chairs, no one stood for ceremony. But I felt every pair of eyes, filled with emotion, following me. Noah stood beneath the oak arch, wearing a charcoal gray suit with no tie. When his eyes met mine, they softened like the wind after a storm. He had once been cornered by the weight of his past and the judgment of others. But now he stood tall, waiting for me, unashamed, unafraid. When Grandpa placed my hand into Noah's, he didn't walk away. He turned to the small gathering and asked to say a few words before the ceremony began. I used to believe love meant compromise, he said. That to love someone you had to follow the rules, do what was proper. But watching Alice and Noah, I've come to understand, love isn't about bowing to legacy. It's about creating a new one, built with heart, with courage, and with the refusal to abandon yourself just to avoid disappointing others. No one spoke. They didn't have to. His words traveled with the breeze, weaving through the rows of guests and into the hearts of everyone listening. Lauren spoke next. But instead of her planned speech, she held up a single piece of paper and looked at me before she began. A letter arrived at my office this morning, she said. From Emily. I was stunned. Lauren glanced at Noah, then read. My name is Emily, Noah's former girlfriend. I'm writing this not to defend myself but to apologize. Because of wounds I never healed, I deliberately sent false information about Noah to Alice's family. The videos, the pregnancy documents, the accusations, they were all meant for one thing: to destroy someone else's happiness because I couldn't stand being left behind. I was wrong. And I publicly accept full responsibility. Lauren folded the letter, her voice thick with emotion. This isn't about vindication. This is about choosing to forgive. I looked at Noah. He gently squeezed my hand. We exchanged our vows under a fading evening sky, surrounded by people who chose to stay, not because they hadn't seen the chaos of our past, but because they had and stayed anyway. There were no rose petal tosses, no towering cakes, no sparkling champagne. But there was laughter. There were tears. There were long, fierce hugs. There was my grandfather, hands trembling as he lifted a mug of warm tea, smiling at me like he had just relived a piece of his own youth. 1 year later, Noah and I moved to a small town in Colorado. Together, we founded a community design firm, not driven by profit but by purpose. We rebuilt aging neighborhoods, restored public parks, renovated schools and libraries in forgotten places. I kept in touch with Lauren, with Marcus, my attorney, and with Grandpa, who sent me handwritten letters every month, telling me about his apple trees or his doctor's appointments. As for my parents, they didn't attend the wedding. They never called afterward. But I no longer felt hollow because of that. The moment I stopped living for their approval, I realized I had finally started living. No one told me freedom could be painful. But that pain, it's worth more than any life lived by someone else's script. What would you do if the people you call family became the very wall between you and your happiness? Would you still stand up for love even if it meant letting go of those who raised you? I made that choice, not because I was braver than anyone else, but because I couldn't keep living a life written by someone else's hands. Family isn't just the place you're born into. It's the people who stay when you show up as your true self. How about you? Have you ever stood between loyalty and the voice of your own heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you're drawn to emotional journeys, untold truths, and the hidden corners of family and love, don't forget to follow this channel. Because the next story might be the one you need most on your own path.